Welcome to Fanshawe College, Letters and Arts, our 40th year. We'll be closing with this particular guest, and it's my pleasure today to welcome you and to introduce Mark Callanan from St. John's, Newfoundland. He's come all the way to read here at Fanshawe College, and we're very happy to have him. I want to tell you a little bit about Mark and some of his work. He has written a book of poetry, his first book, called Scarecrow, published in 2003, was shortlisted for the Newfoundland and Labrador Book Award for Poetry. Sea Legend, which was shortlisted for the BP Nickel Chapbook Award. And Gift Horse, I'm holding the cover here, you'll see it up on the slide behind me too, was on the National Post Best Poetry of 2011 book list. His poetry has appeared in numerous anthologies, and as I understand it, are you also in your newest anthology, which you are co-editing with James Langer?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
One up there.
Contemporary Newfoundland Poetry.
It's due out any day now.
It's coming out any day now, so the proofs are out and the final version and the artwork is all complete. That's very exciting. So some of the anthologies that he has appeared in is Breathing Fire 2, Canada's New Poets, and Open Wide, A Wilderness, Canadian Nature Poems. He's the former editor of Riddle Fence, which he did for 2.5 years, and the picture up there is of the last issue that Mark worked on when he was the editor, and he still stars in Riddle Fence as one of the contributing authors. So he is also the Poetry Reviews editor for Canadian Notes and Queries, and as I said, he lives in St. John's. But I do also want to tell you a little bit about his poetry. And I hope that he is able to talk to you a little bit about his near-fatal experience. It was a medical emergency where Mark was out of this world for a week. And when he came back to consciousness, his brother told him it was 2017. So, not kind of a sick joke, but a lot of the poetry is quite dark. And I know that to our younger audience members, some of that poetry will appeal to you. So, without further ado, please welcome with me Mark Callanan.
I'm just going to grab my, oh Jesus, sorry. I'm just going to grab my phone so I can keep track of time. I don't intend to make any calls. Although we'll see, maybe.
Text during the reading. That's really loud, isn't it? So we need to keep that on there.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Ingrid, for inviting me to come. It's great to be here. However, I can't talk and do what I'm trying to do at the same time.
What are you trying to do?
I'm timing this.
All right.
It's good. Okay. So I'm going to read a few poems from my first book, and then a bunch probably from my latest book. And then I'm also going to try out a couple of things that I haven't actually publicly performed before. And so you can let me know if it comes off or not in no uncertain term. This poem is called At the Butcher's Shop. It comes from, I used to live in Leeds in northern England for a couple of years in my early 20s. And there was this great indoor market there where they had, it was at least 6 or 7 butcher shops all in a row. And I remember they all had this same promotion on where you could buy the bag of meat, assorted meat, you know, pork chops, steak, chicken legs, and it was just in a plastic see-through bag. I think it was 20 quid, 20 pounds it cost. You would walk home, you know, with this substantial bag of meat, and it felt like a good deal. This poem is not about that, but it's about, it talks about one of the butcher shops there. At the butcher shop. Meat is meat, and the block of wood, 2 inches thick, is all that keeps the knife from cleaving to the tabletop. There's a pig on a hook by the window that I swear has been eyeing me since I entered. All 200 pounds of him split open, and still nothing cut from the edge of his glare. If it weren't for the hook, he'd run off madly squealing down the laneway, past all the market stalls. And the butcher's boy watches me as well, his arms buried to the elbow in guts, apron soaked with blood and his right eye dancing in its socket. I ask for beef and edge uneasily away from the pig as the butcher fills a bag, ties it up, and slaps the change into my palm with an overhand chop. There's something makes me wonder as I'm walking out. Can the butcher, with all the blood on his hands and his smock, his arms crossed heavily against his chest, resist the urge to see each passing animal as 2 steps away from the chopping block? This is a poem about a cat I used to own, which when I left for England, I had him in Training University, and then when I left for England, my mother kindly agreed to take care of the cat for me. But upon my return, it became immediately obvious it was no longer my cat. And to be fair, I don't think he ever particularly liked me in the first place. But he was a very good hunter, much to my detriment, because I would have to pick up a lot of dead birds. And a friend of mine used to say that there's nothing deader than a dead bird. A rat dead on the ground is fine, you know, pretty much vermin anyway, but a bird, its natural element is the air. To see one grounded, you know, forever is more profound in some way. This is called Talon. It's the feet that always get me, walking in the tall grass in the garden and finding the split bag of feathers the cat left lying around. The blood I can handle, but the feet, broken twigs, make my stomach surge at my throat, and I turn away. The cat sits on the doorstep, flicks his ears, and waits until I retreat inside and grab a grocery bag. My fingers rigid like a claw, careful not to touch the bone stiffness of the beak, the thin rails of the legs. The only remaining indications that this piece of meat used to sit on my clothesline singing, and sometimes, spying a rustle of movement in the bush, rush to the ear and escape. That's it for that. Ingrid mentioned that I had a near-death experience. It was in 2007, and I contracted bacterial meningitis and ended up in a week-long medically induced coma. And the strangest thing about the experience is that it wasn't an experience at all, in that I was feeling fine and caring about my existence as one is wont to do, and then suddenly I was waking up in the hospital and having explained to me, you know, what happened in the previous week, during which apparently I almost died. So some of the poems from this book, Gift Horse, are coming to terms with, you know, that kind of missing time, and what for my family was, you know, a horrible experience, and for me is a nothing, a blank, but not even a blank, because I wasn't aware that I had missed anything. This is called Butchering Crab. No art in this. You fist a clutch of legs and twist it from the shell. The force of torsion pulls the animal apart. No talk of cruelty can enter into it, though I'm thinking now of being halved by forces bigger than myself. There was a time I would have waited in a tank and marveled at the stream of bubbles spewing from the hose. That came before the hospital, the ICU, the tubes that issued drugs into my veins. There's a scar on my chest where I tried to pull the needle out. These days, I'd rather haul myself apart than have it done without consent. None of this is quite what I meant to say. I'm going to read now a bit of a longer piece. This is called Dead Men's Jackets, and it comes also from hanging out excuse me, in England and frequenting a lot of charity shops, you know, to buy cheap clothes, essentially. It's a meditation on death, obviously. It's called Dead Men's Jackets. Charity shops stock cups that hide their fissures until some minor kitchen knock compels them to explode across the countertop and spread their ashes on the washing up. The teapots are tattooed with hand-painted daisies. or daisies mass-produced to look handmade. Their innards pico-stained by neighbors come to comment on their marriages and kids, come to read the leaves maybe, to see troubled brewing before it's steeped. The Tupperware containers bear the lingering stink of everything they've held to date. Ginger reliquaries, sarcophagi of rotting meat. Nearby, T-shirts testify to minor soccer teams and marathons intended to outrun disease, and multi-city comeback tours by bands whose frontmen overdosed on age. Dead men's overcoats are hung on butcher's hooks along the wall, the kind the grade school runt you once were dangled from, when classmates thought it fun to watch your feet scrape air and dance a hanged man's jig, your trousers bleeding darker as the fear ran out of you and down your leg. A blazer on the rack is stained with applesauce on one lapel. Grim death is the trembling hand that cannot convey the spoon to the mouth. For all I know, that jacket might have dined on the finest line to cross a continent, with linen table napkins, goblets of port wine, silverware that never seemed to tarnish over time. If only we could polish to a shine and catch the light of stations passing in the night. I slip my arms into its arms and shrug the shoulders on. The full-length mirror shows a child in adult clothes who wears the stain of everything he's spilled. I turn in profile. I turn away and trust that my reflection stays. Who can say where the soul goes? The tailor draws a chalk outline and cuts away. I bury my hand inside a pocket, unearth a handkerchief that once caught coughs which came blood-spotted under neon restroom lights and soon became the X-rays dark blot on the lung, the ventilator puffing like a bellows unto dying embers, the chaplain saying words and spreading oil, the grown-up children holding back their tears until at last the pulse unraveled, a loose thread hanging from the cuff of my new jacket. I'm going to read you now a poem called The Ship, which is set in the Ship Pub, which is that bar there with the top photo of me with my scarf, which I lost years ago and never quite got over. That's about all you need to know. Some of it is true. It's mostly true. The Ship. I was in a bar between Duckworth and Water, on my way through a hooting mob of clappers and stompers, a swaying mass of drunk post-teens, when this kid, bespectacled, barely a sliver of bark off a birch rind, pitched suddenly forward as if standing on the deck of a ship in heavy seas. I caught him as he fell, and ducking under an arm, dragged him to the exit like Simon towing Christ's cross down the road. Turns out he'd fallen earlier, lost his footing in a puddle of beer, and struck the edge of the table. Now, 3 drinks later, he was slipping beneath whatever we take to be our conscious lives. No matter. I slung him on the steps across the way and went to ring an ambulance. The kid jerking like a dreaming dog on the hot scent of rabbits, frothing at the mouth now, rabid. When I came back out, Good Samaritan, glad to be of help, he was chatting up a pair of girls, pants piss-stained. I told him about the ambulance. He said, "I don't know what's wrong with me." I don't know either what's wrong with any of us, I mean. There's a poem called The Rain Stick. It's after a Seamus Heaney poem, which is far superior to mine, but mine is kind of a response to, you know what I mean when I say a rain stick, those little dried cactus things, and you turn them upside down, they make that lovely sound of falling rain. The Rain Stick. Heaven is a far cry from the contents of this messenger's tube. Pebbles or peas, desiccated seed, or a fistful of beans that trick the air into hearing last trickles of rain, water droplets cast upon hot griddles, God wringing out a tissue he's wept into. These castanets or spilled rice grains, these coffee beans fed down a grinder's chute, create illusions. You want rain? Step outside, and a high wind full of honest tears will teach you that this cactus stalk could never be enough to slake your thirst, or wash away the curbside grime and drizzle fallen petals in the dirt, or paint her hair just so against a cheekbone, or turn her cotton shirt into a peep show, or make plain the fact of window panes and all the things that they obscure. I'm going to read now a poem. This is an elegy for my father, who is strangely still alive, but I wrote the poem not as an elegy, but having written it, I realized it's the sort of thing one would write after the death of one's father, and not necessarily before, but you know, I'm well prepared for when he does eventually die. It's called The Fair. The fair was held in an asphalt field that housed a horse-drawn carousel, a teacup ride, a Ferris wheel, and gridlocked bumper cars that jerked like manuals. Nearby, in a shanty town of booths, you could wind up and let fly a soft ball at a ziggurat of bottles, blast airgun pellets past tin plate ducks that quacked across the cutout waves. Potholes mined the fairgrounds. I used to hold my father's hand and marvel at the carnival of color. Fiberglass pink wisps of cotton candy on a young girl's face, a tadpole green balloon that wriggled on a strand of twine, pied ponies on the tether of the carousel's spin. Its absence is emptiness today, loose gravel, parking space. Sorry. Shouldn't be coughing into your ears. I'm going to read now, this is a more recent piece. Figure out where I stuck it though. Oh, I know it's in here. Okay, so this is a kind of a coming of age tale about me. I'm going to stop and blow my nose for a second, just bear with me. I'll turn it off so you don't have to be party to that. Pardon me. This is a coming of age tale of an early job I had that I was not at for very long, not because I was fired, though I'm sure if I had stuck around any longer than I did, I would have soon been fired. And that's about all you need to know. You didn't even need to know that particularly. It's called Longshoremen. I'd be like Brando, so I thought, the romance of the working class, the brawn who shunts tubs of snow crab into transport trucks, letting commerce pass across his muscled back. And there I was in the guts of a factory freezer, scrawny, freezing, poorly dressed in cotton gloves and rain gear, stacking bricks of shrimp on pallets while my workmates mocked the deckhand who told them not to smoke, pretending that his Russian accent made a foreign land of no. I'd written them off when the biggest of the lot, seeing me rub my freezing hands together after every box, gave me his insulated gloves. "Take these," he said. "They're warmer." I quit the following day and tried to write the screenplay, but found the words too heavy to be shouldered. So I took a job in advertising, hawking hair regeneration cream to men emasculated by their genes. To be honest, I was never a contender. Right, I'm going to read material. It's called The Rider. It's about me riding my bike as a kid. 10 years old and skinny, propped on a gold-flecked bike that shone like polished spurs, and pretending I was on a horse, which me and my brother used to joust each other on our bicycles, which is ill-advised. Yeah, with like brooms, and nothing ever came of it. I mean, no ER visits ever came of it, so it worked out. I was a big fan of Arthurian legends when I was a kid. Okay, back to the poem, which I'll start again. 10 years old and skinny, propped on a gold-flecked bike that shone like polished spurs, I popped wheelies, fought the lightning strike of panic in my rearing horse. By mistake or not, I turned the wheel so that it caught on the pavement when it landed, bucked the bike, and threw me past the handlebars, past my rider's fantasies, and into this moment in which I see the bigger picture. A boy falling from the sky, his eyes betraying blind animal fear of what comes next, and what comes next, and what comes after. And this is called Shooting the Messenger. Someone's got to take the rap. If not him, then who? Your wife, who giggled when he doffed his cap and bowed so low it looked as if he might collapse? Your right-hand man, who sank his gaze beneath the flagstone floor and shuffled almost imperceptibly, one heel against the other? Yourself? After all, despite the woeful tidings, the just plain shit news trickling from the messenger's hair lip, something in you was proud to catch these intimations of the end and cradle them. Meditate on the page rewritten. The page fled, taking doomsday with him. A lot of the stuff I'm writing these days is kind of a reaction against what is my own I'm a kind of a romantic in a way, in the sense that, and we all do this to a certain extent, that we self-mythologize. The Newfoundland novelist Ed Rich has got a line in the end of his book, The Nine Planets, which says something to the effect of, how brave one would have to be to live without benefit of one's own mythology. So in other words, those narratives we tell ourselves about why we are the way we are, why we are who we are. So I'm picking at that these days. And one of the things I tend to mythologize, or have done in the past, is smoking. Because I've been trying to quit for about 2 years now and haven't yet managed that trick. And this came out of that. It's called Immortality Ode. I'm coughing into handkerchiefs and spotting blood and loving it. No, honestly, I spit up nothing useful, but double check that I'm not ailing. You see, I'm rather pale around the cheeks, the temples, as one who has been treated with leeches, gathered by a gatherer who baits those little suckers with his legs. He wades into the water, waits, then wades back out again, and picks them off, and hawks them to the quacks who siphon blood to balance out the body's humors. This isn't funny. Trust me. I love my life, and want to live it, more or less. There's another one of those. It's called Drinking in the Daytime, which is also the name of a Frederick Seidel poem. And that's, I think, the only relation they bear, well, other than the subject matter. I'm heading home eventually. A bee that halts at every nodding bluebell, bending to sip, blitzed on smells, when my gaze alights on a skirt that blossoms just above the knee. The young mother pulled along by need, her newborn wrapped in pink and sleeping in a jogging stroller. I smile as if to say, I understand. It's wonderful to be alive and at the helm of precious cargo. She turns away, erases me. And suddenly, all I can think of is the toilet's pink and broiling waters, being blindfolded by dimming vision while a firing squad of shooters at the bar took aim and shot me all to pieces. Look, lady, I don't do this all the time. My wife and children are out of town. I'm on the lam. It's daytime and the sun is warm. I like it to unpeel my face and bear me to the afternoon. $22. Yeah, I'll read, I'll definitely read one more and then I'll think about it. Hold on, I gotta blow my nose again. All right. Okay, we're back. So this is a poem. This is really pretty recent, and it requires maybe a bit of explanation. In that, are you all familiar with the Middle English poem Gawain or Gawain, depending on who you ask, in the Green Knight? I always thought it was Gawain growing up. I think a medievalist would probably say Gawain, so I'm going to go with that. But are you familiar with the story? Want a quick synopsis? Okay, so Christmas time, King Arthur's court, King Arthur again, yeah, of course. And this Green Knight bursts in. He's dressed all in green armor, but his skin is green, his hair is green, he has a green horse. And he issues a challenge to the court of King Arthur, challenging, one of the knights to strike him a blow with his axe, and then if he survives it, he will return the favor 1 year hence. And so Arthur's going to do it, and then Gawain steps in and says, no, I'll do it, I got this one. And he cuts off the Green Knight's head, and the Green Knight walks over and picks up his head and pops it back on and says, I'll see you in a year, and you have to find me. So that's the basic, it's a lot more eloquent than that. There's a great translation of it, actually, Simon Hermitage's version of it. The English poet Simon Hermitage published a great translation about 3 or 4 years ago. Anyway, all this to say, I was trying to find a metaphor for talking about the kind of disconnect I have often felt in my life between mind and body. And that, I'm someone who always been, especially as a teenager, as most teenagers are, not entirely comfortable with my physical form. And, that's lessened over the years, but still, I kind of view myself as an intellect, a brain carried around on, stilts, or like, I don't know, a poorly made machine that's, just dragging me around from place to place so I can do what I want to do, which is think. But anyway, that came up because I'm somewhat morbid with the metaphor of decapitation. And this proceeds out of that. I hope it comes off. Gawain and the Green Knight. Like the Green Knight stooping to retrieve his own severed melon and hold it aloft like a lantern, I'm fumbling for an errant thought, though without his flair for theater, the grand gesture, his ability to make B-movie stunts not only plausible but frightening to the knight with axe in hand, who turns ghostly at the notion of trekking to the chapel to see himself decapitated. Figuratively, I mean, he won't see anything, unless you trust the French doctor who declared a head freshly severed spoke to him in blinks, thus proving that the body is vestigial, a thing existing past the point of its own utility, persisting in existence as if existence was the point. It's not. Our doc went on to do nothing else of substance. Presumably, the executed went on to be buried or burned. I think that they were done with mounted pikes by then, though, truth be told, my research consists entirely of Al-Qaeda videos, the ones in which they bag the head, then saw it off with dull machetes. A man drives a truck through bad country and ends up separated from himself. Point being, there is the me that resides quite comfortably in my brain pan, part of a machine that shits and eats and climbs a ladder to slop paint on a wall to make it pretty for his clientele. And then the me who's cut off from the scene, who passively observes the action of his fingers playing concussively the keyboard, the me that drifts like a dumb, bumping helium balloon against the ceiling, the me that thinks itself into being, and in so doing tips its hat to French philosophers and doctors both, those that prove I'm here and sitting in the throne of power, and the ones that prove a me usurped from his gilded seat, who contemplates the new regime from a pike pole at the city gates. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Want to ask me some questions? Why are you so morbid?
No, I like it. Actually, to be honest, I just saw a poster for a poet telling poetry, so like names that I'm happy I came.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Did you have a question?
No,
No.
just thank you.
Thanks.
I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask me.
Shoot.
Well, how long have you been writing? How did you know you wanted to write?
I started off writing song lyrics when I was probably, I guess about 16 or so. I had designs on starting a band, and yeah, very romantic dreams of getting fucked up on various substances and the sorts of things that have very little to do with actually writing. But that young boys think about. And so I did that for a while, and I was abysmal at guitar because I didn't actually put much time into practicing it. My brother infuriated me because he was very good at it, but he practiced, so of course he was. I just wanted to be good at it without having to put the work in. So I started out writing song lyrics for songs I composed that were horrible. But I realized at a certain point that it was that I actually enjoyed more than writing songs, was writing what were essentially poems set to music. Did I cover it? I can't remember what the question was now.
Yeah. How did you get started?
Oh, how did I get started? Yeah. So it proceeded from that. Yeah, around 16. I started taking it more seriously when I got into university, like around when I was 18. Yeah.
Did you take any courses in creative writing?
No. There was only at Memorial, which is where I studied. At that point in time, there were only ever 3 writing courses: one in poetry, one in fiction, and third in drama or nonfiction. I can't remember now. And they were offered kind of infrequently, and they always seemed to clash with courses I had to do. So I didn't end up doing it, and I don't know if I regret it now or not. It would have been nice to have experienced it at the very least. But I don't know. I don't think it hurt me not doing it. But I would have liked to have experienced it. Yeah. I did electives, a lot of electives, but not in creative writing. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
You mentioned you like King Arthur, but what other poets or authors or major inspirations?
I think in a lot of ways I still haven't gotten over T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. There's just something in that still, every time I read it. A friend of mine told me once, that's the kind of poem you'll grow out of, right? That, it's a very teenage, angsty kind of sentiment. I think he was wrong, or I'm still immature, one of the two. But I found that it's still something that speaks to me, and in a sense, every time I set out to write something, I'm kind of trying to write that in my own idiom, So that stuck with me, and there's tons of people I could mention. I went through another period during which I was obsessed with Ted Hughes' Crow, I think that that's obvious in some poems that I've written. Yeah, I mean, these days, to be honest, I don't get to read half as much these days as I did. My editor on his blog was doing this promo thing of, you know, like what different poets are reading these days, and he wanted you to take a picture and he would post it. And mine is Harold and the Purple Crayon, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a wondrous story of a young boy and his imagination and his magic purple crayon, or, you know, yeah, either imagination or a magic crayon. Because it's true, that's what I was reading that day to my son. And I tend to read a lot of kids' books these days, and not as many of my own books as I would like. But that's not, I don't know, that's good too.
Now, what brought you over to England? Because I
brought me to
did
England?
an exchange.
Okay.
I lived over there a few years myself and made it up to Leeds.
When I finished university in 2001, I had no friggin' clue what I wanted to do next. And a buddy of mine, his father was from Leeds. He'd grown up with me, but he moved there because he had dual citizenship and he could. And so when I finished university then, and was trying to figure out what to do, I figured, okay, I'll go live with him for a bit, travel around, and you know, see what England is all about. And so I did. I had a 2-year limited, you know, working visa there. Yeah, and it was great. I loved it, and I probably would have stayed longer, but my visa ran out, and I didn't have the guts to like try and find under the table kind of work. So then I came back, but I still think about it a lot. But I wonder sometimes though if that's, you know, if my attachment to it, if I went back today, I doubt it would mean the same things to me, because that was a period of my life that cannot be repeated. You know, I was 21 when I moved there. You know, when I was young and carefree and drank a lot and traveled around. You know, I couldn't do that again today, and I wouldn't want to either, because it would be too sad. Because then I would be one of those guys who's trying to revisit their young adulthood.
Would you suggest traveling?
Would I suggest traveling? If you want to travel, sure. Why not? Yeah, I think there's great value in that, in seeing, you know, if you don't ever travel, for one, you never leave your own comfort zone, and for two, you have no context by which to judge your own upbringing, you know, and your own culture. You see it only on its own terms, right? You need a foil in order to be able to kind of properly appreciate where you came from. And I found that too, coming back to when I was in, you know, when I grew up in St. John's, and I was saying earlier to Ingrid over lunch, post-moratorium in St. John's, so, you know, just after 1992, it was a very bleak period for, you know, the province's history, because it's our primary industry, and that which had defined our sense of self up until that point, it suddenly disappeared, you know. So being a kid in that context, I still remember sitting down at breakfast eating cornflakes or something, or Cheerios, probably. And you know, the radio just going on and on and on about the moratorium. And yeah, it seemed like there was no hope anymore, and little point in hanging around. But at that time, so when I finished university and went to England, I couldn't fucking get out of there quickly enough, right? I wanted to be rid of it in the way that many people are, you know, at that age. And you kind of, that's the other thing about traveling too. Well, when you're younger and traveling, it affords you an opportunity to play with your own identity, I guess. You know, because growing up, to a certain extent, you're a product of your circumstances. You know, everyone around you, your parents and all that. But you don't really get a chance to see what else you could be. You know, you have a very, it's not a fixed identity, but I thought it was, you know what I mean? And so getting away from that was like, okay, well, you know, what kind of person am I really? And yeah, what sort of person I can become. But we're always like that. I mean, we're malleable. We're always changing. I don't know where I was going with that. Went to England because was get away, escape. Anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I went wandering down a back path there, and then I lost my way in the trees. Any more questions? Yeah.
But you have Church Festival now, so you're good. Back to your induced coma. How long did your brother trick you that it was 20?
Oh, it was only for, he didn't keep it up for, days or anything. It was only, well, for one, no one would have let him. But, it was only a matter of a few minutes.
And you really have no recollection?
No, I don't even remember him saying that. When my wife told me after that he had said that, bastard. Because I was coming down off, I'd been on morphine, and so I was all wonky. I don't remember any of that. What I do remember is I have a very vague recollection of Friday evening before a friend of mine was over, and I remember having like a weird kind of headache in the back of my head, and I have a patchy memory of running a fever and my wife sticking me in a cold tub to get my temperature down. And then it was, a week later. Yeah. But I only remember those details like a few months after the fact, right? It was a really strange experience to be in because, like I said earlier, it's there's a part of your life that's just, it's missing, not there.
So your poems are really informed by your observations about death. I mean, I think about death every day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Philip Larkin in the Paris Review interview he did by mail. He wouldn't meet in person because Paris Review interviews are those long form interviews where the interviewer spends several days with the poet or whoever the writer and sort of teases out this interview over a period of days. Anyway, he wouldn't meet with anyone because he was, I think, incredibly shy. So he would only do it if they could do it by post. But he says at some point, I wish I could remember the exact quote, but it was a question about, he was talking about, like happiness or something like that. And he says essentially that, I'm as happy as I can be knowing that one day everyone I love will die and I will too. Which I thought was very kind of profound in where it speaks to me in that, because that's very much how I feel. And my sort of morbid obsessions over death predate that near-death experience, right? So it's not like it just came about as a result of that. It just kind of gives me more cred.
One thing. Oh, there's another question.
Yeah, in some of your darker anecdotes and pieces, you're often still saying it with a smile, or sometimes with a humorous little phrases like the Green Knight.
I think my poems are funny.
Yeah, well, they often are. Like Green Knight loses his head with an axe, and he loses his melon. Right? Stuff like that. Where does that kind of spark of humor come through? Is that a conscious technique?
I don't know. I think I'm generally a pretty joyous person. I just have a very dark sense of humor. I find humor in dark places. And I think one can be too intensely concerned with ponderous matters, and that's not me. I think I kind of veered in that direction for a while, and then I realized, you know what? Life is pretty good, and I enjoy it on the whole. So let that be reflected in my writing. So even in serious poems, I think I'm pretty playful in terms of how I go about talking about whatever I'm talking about.
Thank you, Mark, very much for being here. Thanks so much for coming today. It's so good of you. And we want to invite you again for next year. The Letters and Arts Society continues in its 41st year in September of 2013. Thank you.